Welcome to Tuesday's Tips and Techniques. I'm going to be exploring colours used in printers at home and why they can be useful for colour mixing in watercolour. I'm going to be talking about basic colour theory and also explaining warm and cool colours and why they're important, how to recognise them. And lastly, I'm going to be talking about my 4 must-have colours. So, shall we get started? Here is yellow, which is in the yellow cartridge that comes out of my inkjet printer, my Brother inkjet printer. I'm just going to put a little bit on my watercolour sketch pad. I've always been fascinated that you can get 3 primary colours in an inkjet printer or these home printers. Here's magenta. Just going to pop this out as well. And you get black as well, 3 primaries in black, and you can get all these amazing colour prints. You know, you're printing off your photographs and you get really great colour matches. So I thought, why don't I try this with watercolour painting, especially if you want to just start out buying your colours. This is cyan, so we've got yellow, magenta and cyan. They're all cool colours, which is fascinating. And then you've got black ink. So it doesn't really have a lot of colour in here at all. So I'm fascinated by this. I want to explore it with colour mixing with watercolours. So this is just black watercolour here. And it's actually a prettier colour than the ink. And this is cadmium yellow pale. And I've tried to match the inkjet printer colours as best I can. So the pink was a bit trickier. So I've gone through a few pinks here. This one here, though, is the pink I go with. It's Permanent Rose. So I'm just watering this down here now. The previous one was Quinacridone Rose. It was a little bit too warm, and I'll talk about that more later. This is Quinacridone Magenta. So I'm using different manufacturers as well. This is almost too cool. So I've left that, and this is Opera Rose, which I've been using recently, but it's not quite right for what I'm looking for here. So I'm going to stick with the Permanent Rose. This is Cerulean Blue. So I'm just going to add some water to that now to see if it's a match to the cyan. Not quite there. This is Windsor & Newton's Manganese Blue, and I feel this is the best blue that I have, that I own, that will be the best match here. This is a little bit of phthalo turquoise, but it's not quite right. It's a bit too greeny. And this is Prussian blue, again, not quite right. And I thought I'd use, put down some little bit of ultramarine as well. It's far too warm and not quite right either. So I'm going to use the cadmium yellow pale. So I'm just going to paint down the colours I'm going to use. I'm using the Permanent Rose. It's a Windsor & Newton Permanent Rose. And I'm going to use the Manganese Blue by Windsor & Newton as well. They're really good colour matches, but I will put colour alternatives as well in the description below. And you may also have your own suggestions. So now I'm going to do a colour circle. So I'm going to try to do what a printer ink does. I'm going to try and match the colours with the colour circle. Now, colour circles are a really good way of explaining colour theory. There are 3 main primary colours. Blue, which is I'm painting on now. This is a cool blue, and as I said, I will explain more about that later. If you're going to do a colour circle, I really recommend it, and I would recommend putting the strongest tone straight from the tube at the top, and then diluting it as you come towards the centre of the circle. And that way you can see a dark and light version of your colour. So I'm now painting on the Permanent Rose, and I forgot to do the stronger version at the top and the lighter version at the bottom. But not to worry, if you do that, just add more water as I'm doing now. It's quite a good idea. So what I've done as well with this colour circle, I've divided it up into, well, I wouldn't say they were equal, but they're 12 little sections there, divided of 12 pieces of pizza or cake, whatever you fancy. But and I'm sort of leaving 3 gaps between each of the primary colours. So this is the cadmium yellow pale. You could use lemon yellow, which is even cooler. And again, I'm just diluting the part nearest to the centre there, so you get a good sort of the strongest tone down to the lightest tone. What I've done now is I've added the manganese blue with a tiny speck of the yellow to make a blue-green, and now I'm mixing up sort of 50-50 really, the blue with a little bit more yellow to make green, which is the secondary colour, and the blue-green is the tertiary colour, and I will speak a little bit more about that later. So I'm just again diluting at the bottom so you can see light, sort of darker and lighter versions of the tertiary and secondary colours. And this is the yellow green, so it's got more yellow, less blue, and it's the tertiary colour yellow green. It's really a great way of actually learning about colour mixing this. So now I've started off, I'm going to make a yellow orange, which is the tertiary colour. So start with the yellow, add a speck of pink. And sometimes, depending on the pinks you use, you might have to use a little bit more or a little bit less. So it's a real art to colour mixing. Do use a small brush. If you're going to use a big brush, you can lose control of the colour mixing. Now I'm going to make an orange, which is the secondary colour. And again, just you've got to sort of go by your gut really how much is enough. And it's a good way of practicing and learning this. So it's quite a nice bright orange here. And it's about 50-50. And again, it depends on the colours. So now I'm making my red orange, mixing it. I'm starting with the pink, adding a little bit, actually I've used a little bit of the orangey colour there, but it's basically lots of pink, a little bit of yellow to make the tertiary red orange. In this instance we're using pink, but pink is seen as a primary red, and it actually makes a beautiful colour. I really like that colour. And always keep changing your water when you're doing colour mixing, and make sure you keep rinsing your colour between washes. So I've started off with the pink and added a speck of blue. And depending on which blues you use, you sometimes have to use quite a small amount of blue because it can be very overpowering. You'll just end up with dark blues. So I've added mostly pink with a touch of blue. And again, diluting as I go towards the centre. And it's actually quite a nice way of working here. You really get to look at, get to feel your darks and lights as well, your tonal values. So this is the secondary colour now. I'm trying to get the balance between the pink and the blue, trying to get it looking even. So this is violet, my secondary colour. And I'm just painting that wet on dry, diluting, lots of clean water now, and push it up to the colour so you get that sort of darkish, mid and lightest tone. So now I'm starting with the manganese blue, and I'm adding a tiny little bit of the pink. I use the tip of my brush to get the colour as well, to get the control. And it's a good idea to kind of have, you can really see that this is kind of almost a blue, very much a blue violet. I can't really see much violet now looking back, but you want it to have a blue bias. So you've got this as your blue violet tertiary colour. And looking at that colour circle now, I've got some good oranges, fabulous greens. I'm not too keen on the violets, and I feel that sometimes you do need to replace that sort of cold cyan blue with an ultramarine or a cobalt blue to make, especially to make a really good blue violet. So I've started with the ultramarine here, added a touch of pink, and I'm going to paint now the blue violet, and straight away look at the difference. It really looked much brighter, much cleaner almost, especially the blue violet, the tertiary colour. The other two you could get away with almost, but definitely for that stronger, darker blue violet colour, the ultramarine really is a great substitute for a cold blue to create a much more pure violet colour. Another thing you can do with the colour circles, you can mix opposite colours. Opposite colours make browns, but they also in watercolour make neutral colours. So, and they're really useful for watercolour painting, for making lovely soft greys. And I have mixed up here the violet with the yellow. If you look at the colour circle, yellow is directly opposite the secondary colour violet, which is the red and blue mixed together. So basically, these are all three primaries mixed together, but in different combinations. So taking you back to the colour printer inkjet cartridges, that's how it works, obviously with the black included, but you're mixing all these different colour combinations and amounts. So you could have 75% blue, 10% black, and then 10% yellow and 5% pink. I think that comes up to 100%. But you know, it's just all these different quantities make all these different colours. And I've always been fascinated by colour mixing. When you go into somewhere and want paint made up when you go to your local DIY store, and they put these different pigments in. You come out with this colour that matches. It's amazing. So here I'm mixing up blue and orange, and you get these lovely different colours. Because it's a cold blue, I would say it doesn't turn into a brown or a neutral greyish colour. It's actually quite green. If I was to use the ultramarine and the orange, you'd probably get a little bit more of a neutral sort of brownish colour. I've realised actually on the left there I put pink and blue. It's actually yellow and violet top left there, so sorry about that. I'm actually now mixing up the pink with some of the green, and I really like this combination. One of my favourite colour mixes is Alizarin crimson with Viridian green. You get the most amazing greys and darks, almost black. So do try that. It's a really good tip. But I've got some very subtle colours here, warm sort of shades. But anytime you do any sort of colour mixing like this, which was great fun to do, especially when you're at a loss to know what to paint, or you've lost your confidence, or you just want to understand more, make little colour charts, and do make sure you put little marks down of colour so you know what you've used. When you go back there, you think, how on earth did I get that colour? Well, that's how to do it. So this is the ultramarine now, and I'm going to show you how I show my students for years how to make a shadow colour. So I always start off with ultramarine, and I make a blue violet. So I add some pink to make a blue violet, and then a little bit of yellow. Now this does take practice, because sometimes my students put loads of yellow in, and then it turns into this sort of green sort of colour. You've got to put enough yellow in there that it sort of greys so it makes it more of a shadow colour. So keep practicing this. It's just the 3 primary colours, and you're making a shadow colour. And I love doing this. So if it's too pinky violety colour, so you've got it more of a pink violet, and you add yellow, you're going to get a really good brown. You're not going to get a shadow colour. So it's got to be a blue violet with a touch of yellow. Hope that makes sense. And just again, make a little bit of a record of that. And what I've done here is I've made a long blue with swatch of that first primary, and then little dots for the other 2 primaries, the yellow and the pink. So I know how I achieve that. So I'm going to just go through this a little bit again, just to hopefully it makes sense. I've just marked in my primaries, the cyan, the pink and the yellow, red, yellow and blue. The secondary colours, the orange, the green. I was trying to figure out which was my violet there, but violet, tertiary, blue, green, yellow, orange, red, orange, blue, violet and a red violet or a pink violet. I really hope that makes sense. And I'm just writing all of this down. And if you find, especially if you're a beginner starting out, just make a note of all this, you know, how you got there, and even have it out near you when you're painting. Not too near, because you might get some splashes on there, but it's so useful because it sort of really helps when you know a little bit more about colour mixing. It'll give you more confidence. So just going through all of the colour names here. And this is just the start of it really, but it really is good to know this foundation and why things do what they do. And you'll get a little bit more experimental, and it's just such fun to fill your sketchbooks up with lots of different colour charts and things like that. And it's a great way, if you're starting a painting, get your colours out, mix them together, see if they are going to do what you need them to do in your watercolour painting. And just going back to the printer ink, I just thought I'd include a little bit of colour mixing with black, because obviously that's what they have in the printers. So what I'm doing here is I'm mixing black with the primary colours. So black with the yellow, the similar yellow to what you'd find in an inkjet printer, and now I am mixing the black with the pink. You'll get a lot of dark tonal colours with black, and it also creates lots of lovely neutral colours as well. So if you'd like to do something like this, start with the black and then add a little bit of pink each time till you get back to your pink. The same with the yellow, the same with the blue. And I'm using a little bit of the manganese blue again here, and just working my way to the pure blue colour, just seeing all these different shades. I really like that colour actually with black and blue mixed together. It's a really useful colour as well. If you don't have any black, you could use Payne's Grey, indigo, neutral tint for any of these. What I'm doing now is I'm actually mixing black with blue and pink, so it's the secondary colour, the violet, and this will just be what your inkjet printer will be doing as well. So you've got a lovely grey violet colour here. I've mixed some black in with the green. I really like the colour this has made. It's very luscious almost. It's a beautiful colour, much more depth to it. And finally I'm mixing the black with the orange to get a really nice sort of different shades of brown. So I'm going to discuss now about warm and cool colours, and straight away here I've divided my colour circle in half. I've got my yellow and my red in this section. I've got a red violet, a red orange, an orange, a yellow orange and a yellow. Think of all these as in, you know, colours that are related to hot heated things, the sun. So these colours would be considered warm colours. So the other half of my colour circle must be the cooler half. Obviously you've got your blue, which you could associate with the cool blue water. And obviously you've got your blue greens, your blue violets, your greens, your yellow green and violet. So any colours that kind of look like those colours would be considered cooler colours, but it all depends on which colours they are. It can get a little bit complicated, but I will show you another way, a useful way, how you can discover which colours are warm or cool. One way of discovering is just to hold your colours. I've got a Prussian blue and a cobalt blue here. I want to see which one's cool and which one's warmer than the other. If you look at the cobalt on the right, it veers towards the violet colour. It looks like it's got a little bit more red in it almost. And if you look at the Prussian blue on the left, it's more greeny looking. If you can't quite see that, there is another way you can discover which blue is cooler or warmer than the other. And the simplest, quickest way is just to see which makes the best green. The one that makes the best green is the coolest blue, the brightest green that is. So I'm using lemon yellow, which is a cool yellow, and I've mixed it with the Prussian here, and I'm mixing it also with the cobalt blue, and straight away they both make quite pretty greens because it's a cool yellow colour. But you can see on the right the cobalt blue and the yellow is a little bit more muddier, not as pure as the green, the bright green on the left. So one way of discovering whether a red is warm or cool, or which pink is cooler or warmer than the other, is actually mixing it with blue, because the ones that make the purest violet colour are the cooler reds. So I'm just using a cadmium red here, and I'm mixing it with some ultramarine. I'm going to get a really nice colour here, but it's not going to be a pure violet. So it's a warm red with a warm blue, but you're not getting a lovely violet colour. You need that cool colour. So it's quite muddy as well. It's almost brown. So this is actually the permanent rose I'm using here, straight from this little art box here. And I'm going to add a little bit of the ultramarine blue. And straight away, look at the difference there. Lovely, beautiful, much more of a pure violet colour compared to that sort of muddier colour earlier from the cadmium red and the ultramarine. And the way to decide which is a cooler or warmer yellow, this is Indian yellow, and I've mixed it on the left with some cobalt blue, and now I'm mixing it with some Prussian blue. It's made a slightly better green, but they're both quite sort of neutral greens, not bright like the top left. So this tells me it's a warm yellow because it doesn't make bright greens. So I really hope you found that tip useful. So to finish off, my must-have 4 colours. I would start with a cool blue, of course. Obviously, I'm using the manganese blue, but not everyone's going to have that. So I would suggest cerulean or Prussian blue, even phthalo blue or turquoise. I always say to my students, any yellow will do, but normally you'll have a lemon yellow or a cadmium yellow in your art box, especially if you're starting out as a beginner. Permanent rose is a great pink, as you have seen in this tutorial, but you could use quinacridone magenta, alizarin crimson. So there's lots of pinks out there, and of course the star of the show, ultramarine blue, but you could use cobalt blue as well. can create lots of darks with these colours and tremendous amount of colour mixing. I really hope you've enjoyed this tutorial and found it helpful. The discussion about the inkjet printer inks and how they can relate to the colour circle, and of course a little bit of colour theory there, just to explain how to mix the primary, secondary, tertiary colours, complementary colours, those opposite the colour circle, how they can make neutral colours, warm and cool colours, how you can recognise them. I hope it's not too much, but I hope you can sort of relate back to this, and it encourages you to maybe make your own colour charts and colour circles as well. If you have any questions, please put them in the comments section. If you'd like to see more tutorials like this, don't forget to subscribe to my channel, where you will get updates of my latest tutorials. And if you'd like to see more in-depth tutorials with downloadable sketches that are ad-free, why not check out my Patreon membership? Details about that can be found in the top right hand corner of this video or in the description below. Thank you again for watching. Happy painting. Bye for now.